at one time a North Carolinian, now in Alabama, from Tennessee, is Dr. James Flatt. It's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, when I signed up for this a little earlier, top 10 OA issues from Alabama, I thought this is not going to be that hard, you know, because we can all think of, okay, I can think of the top 10 right off the top of my head, and as I got into this, I got this one's a little bit better than I thought, and it sort of ended up being like the college football playoff issue that this is kind of a subjective list. It's my list. And it was a lot more difficult for me to put together what really are what I consider to be the top 10 OA issues from the state. And what I'm doing is taking the council's lodges whose headquarters are in the state of Alabama. And that's Greater Alabama Council, Coosa Lodge now, which was from the merger of Cherokee, Achinachi, and Cascanampu back in 1999. Aracoma Lodge in Tuscaloosa for Black Warrior, Alabama in Montgomery, Kawiki in Dothan, southeast part of the state, and Washolina White Fang in Mobile. Ashwaubenon has one little, Choctaw Area Council has one little county here. Chattahoochee has three counties over here on the eastern border, and Yastaga, which is of the ones that I might have included, might have been Yastaga because they've been with us in section meetings for so many years. Actually, their headquarters is in Pensacola in the Florida Panhandle, so I left them out. So to try to make it easier on me and to give myself some way of making some choices, I created a few rules, for lack of a better way to say it. This is a subjective ranking. There's no real objectivity here, and I consider this to be scarcity derived, not dollar value derived. So these are not the top 10 most expensive patches in the state in history. These are the ones that I think are the most scarce, are the ones that would be on a list, a needs list, a top 10 needs list from an Alabama Order of the Arrow issue collector. It's collectability influenced, and by collectability I mean sought after by the state collectors, not necessarily sought after by the individual lodge collector. Subtle difference there, but there are some issues, and I'll point these out as I go, that may not necessarily be collectible because they were one-offs and things of that nature. So they're sought after in a sense, maybe by the lodge collector, but not really collectible because they're only one of them. This is also a time influence list. And by that, I mean, which issues have stood the test of time? One of the biggest examples of that is the 224 R1, the Kawiki Lodge 224 3 Cloud. 30 years ago, that would have been in the top 3, probably certainly in the top 5. But as time has a way of doing, these things showed up over the years and started filling some holes in collectors' lists. So even though it's still a valuable patch and still brings a lot of money, it may not have the same influence as far as being a top 10 issue anymore. And as I normally would, just because of my own bias, I've weighted this toward older issues. And some of that is the time-tested theory issue too. I mean, there are a lot of derived rarities, over the last 5 to 10 years that people might think, well, this one's got to be top 10. And I thought, well, you know what? It hadn't served the test of time, in my opinion, yet. So if it's from 1995 and up or so, it didn't make this list. Now, because there's a lot of subjectivity here, and I know we've got a lot of Alabama collectors on the call, which I appreciate. I thought I'd do a little teaser first, and because all of you, I'm sure, have got your own idea of the top 10. So I thought I'd start by saying, well, okay, what didn't make the list? let's talk honorable mentions first, the ones that actually didn't. I think some of these may surprise you. Some of these I have a feeling that you'll find that are probably on your list, but didn't make mine. So let's start at the top of the state here with Cascanampo at Huntsville, which is on the Tennessee-Alabama border. Here are two honorable mentions. The first here is the F1A, or the first Flatt. You will see these. You'll see this design not uncommonly, but if you're seeing it, you're probably seeing an F1B out there in a sale or something. You'll probably go through 50 F1Bs before you'll find an F1A. This is a tough first Flatt A variety to find, and yet it didn't make the list. This is somewhat of a enigma within our lodge. This would be, for lack of a better way to say it, the dance team patch for Cascanampo Lodge. In the 1960s, a group of lodge members formed what was a ceremony dance type troupe, if you will, calling themselves the Vanishing Apache. And they issued this 3-inch round patch, which you'll see off and on this orange neckerchief, which they commonly wore when they were together as a group. Again, very rare patch, has no description of Order of the Arrow at all in it. If you found it in a 50-cent box, it would be a great one to pick up. One of the top issues in the lodge, didn't make the list. In 1972, Cascanampo had what they called their first powwow. Now, they'd had fall fellowships in the past, but for some reason decided to call this a powwow. And the lodge is sort of on a downswing. So by 74, the lodge had only 12 members at the fall fellowship. And no one was going to order patches for 12 people to show up, right? So one of the members who did attend, he took 12 of the 1972 patches, which were still left over, and his mom removed the 2 and put a 4 in, and he gave them back out to the 12 that attended. This I consider to be sort of one of those collectability things. Didn't make the list, although it's extremely difficult to find. This is a common Cascanampo Flatt from the late 70s, but as is often in other lodges, reorders came back with a black border and with a green border during the 4 or 5 years after the late 70s, both of which were rejected and sent back. Although, just as one would expect, some of them got kept, and you'll see these show up every now and then. I'm not sure they would really be called prototypes. They're really called rejects, but they are difficult to find if you're a lodge collector. 310. Sequoia chapter is one of the chapters that actually produced their own chapter patch, and this one dates from the late 70s, early 80s. The common red border was one that you'll see if you collect the lodge. The lavender border was for chapter officers only, and there were probably no more than 12 of those. And so again, if you're a lodge collector, you may have a hard time finding that one, but still, in my opinion, didn't make the top 10 list for the state. And then the last one, and I've covered a lot of Cascanampo stuff because there's some obscure stuff, is this is a true prototype, a jacket patch of which 2 were made in the late 70s, early 80s, somewhere in that time frame. One for the Council Scout Executive and one for the Lodge Professional Advisor. The Lodge decided not to make this, probably because of its size and expense. But the Council Scout Executive kept his, and the Professional Advisor kept his. There are 2 of them, and they are known in collections. And just to give you a feel for how big those things are, this is the Cascanampo neckerchief patch from which the design was rendered. So this to give you an idea of what they were trying to shoot for. Again, very rare. Didn't make the list because, again, it's too off and not really not really a collectible, in my opinion, if you're looking at collecting Alabama Order of the Arrow. Let's flip down to Achinachi Lodge 135. We have several members, I think, on the call, previous members of Achinachi, and that's from Anniston, Alabama, in this section of the state. There are a lot of great issues in this lodge, really more than you can account for. These are considered to be among the top of those issues, and still, I don't believe, make the list. This is their first issue they call the Blue Owl. It dates from the late 40s. I think there were pictures that Seth Hill has shown me of scouts wearing these prior to 1950 on their uniform. And then this round called the Silver Bustle, which is sort of has a white background as opposed to a gold background on a later round. This used to be, in my opinion, 35, 40 years ago, the most difficult patch to find in the lodge. And again, as time is going on, these occasionally turn up, although they still bring a lot of money. You know, the standard value for one of these was $1,500 and up back in the day. And yet, since we're not talking about dollar value derived top 10, this one didn't quite make the cut. Move on down just a little bit farther south to Birmingham, sort of the center of the state, and this was the home of Cherokee Lodge 50. And again, Cherokee was a lodge well known for their no trading clause, difficult to find, always a hard number to get, particularly if you were a beginner collector. Among all of those issues, here are a couple that are good but didn't quite make the list. The 1975 Powwow patch is one of the last that most collectors will find in that lodge as far as their powwows go, the activity patches. And this neckerchief, which is a Brotherhood neckerchief, which is really no more than an R2 with two X1 arrows sewn to a red cloth. And one would think, well, you know, that was done by somebody or some mom. And actually, no, it was issued this way as a Brotherhood neckerchief. They're a little bit difficult to find, much more difficult than the regular embroidered or silkscreen neckerchiefs that you find. Let's go a little bit farther west and south to Tuscaloosa. This is Aracoma. And again, when you think Aracoma, the first thing I think of that might not be on the list or might be on the list would be the A1. Their first issue Arrowhead, which is very difficult. And, you know, again, I think always commands a 4-figure value and up. But I've highlighted a couple of honorable mentions here that, to me, if you're a collector, these may actually still be on your list. This one is the S2. Now, most of you that are non-Alabama away collectors will say, well, I've seen that. I've seen hundreds of those. And I would say, yeah, you're close. This is the S2. The S1, which looks exactly like it, has white twill in this little eye looking thing. And the S2, which is interesting, it actually does have a little twill in it, has yellow twill in the eye. So again, you'll probably go through 100 S1s with white twill before you'll find an S2 with yellow twill. And this, I remember 15, 20 years ago, I traded with one of the prominent members of this lodge, and this was his last lodge need, to try to find a yellow eye Aracoma S2. Among some of the more recent, in 1984 isn't exactly recent anymore, but Aracoma had 2 patches for their 84 Fall Fellowship, a white felt and a red felt. And this red felt was issued, I believe, to officers only, and they are numbered on the back. And again, if you're looking to collect from the state or from that lodge in particular, that may be one that's pretty hard for you to find. Still, I'm going through honorable mentions now, not made it to the top 10 list. So again, you may already be crossing off some of the ones that you're thinking. A little bit farther south, Montgomery is the state capital, Tuckabashie and Alabama Lodge. This 1950 issue, the 10th anniversary, felt, again, 40 years ago, would have probably been the top one to find in this lodge. But again, as time goes on, some of these things come out, and although still it demands a good price, they're a little easier to find, and most collectors have found those for the holes in their collection. These could easily be argued, these other two, Horseshoe Bend Trail neckerchiefs and the Voyagers, particularly the segments, could easily be in the top 10. The reason I didn't actually put them in the top 10 is because these were lodge-sponsored trails or lodge-sponsored treks. So although they were issued or they were issued by the lodge, you didn't have to be an Order of the Arrow member to earn them. Okay. The Horseshoe Bend Trail has patches and segments. This neckerchief is the most difficult piece among the Horseshoe Bend Trail items. And then many of you may have seen the Alabama Voyagers patch. Alabama Lodge created a trek, and they sponsored it and called it the Voyagers Trek. And this is a 1962 or so era trek. So the patch itself isn't easy to find, but the subsequent repeater pieces are extremely difficult to find. You got the patch, again, didn't have to be an OA member, just had to complete the trail or the trek. Got the patch for the first voyage, but if you decided to do it again, you got a green bar, again, a gold bar, and so these incredibly nondescript little embroidered rectangles are probably the most difficult thing to find in Alabama, because most people would not have done it more than once. And whoever held the bag of these things, probably, had them in a drawer somewhere, and somebody opened the drawer and they look at these things and think, well, what are these things? They have no description whatsoever. They probably got thrown away. Who knows? But they're very difficult to find. So if you're looking through a 50-cent box and you see something that looks like this, that may be what we're looking for. A little farther down on the coast is Mobile. White Fang was their original name, and this is the White Fang F1, the bird not fully embroidered. Tough first flap, $2,500 plus or minus, first flap, but not what I consider to be in the top 10. There are enough of them out there, I guess is what I'm saying, that they filled enough holes. They're still on lots of collectors' lists, but most of the major collectors have or have had access to these. In the Woashoalina Lodge issues, I would say the dance team is probably the best of the bunch, particularly for honorable mention. It's a 1960s dance team jacket patch issue, pretty tough to find, but still didn't quite make the list of my top 10 anyway. And then we'll go one more down to Dothan, Alabama, which is Kawiki 224. Now, this was the 224R1 3 cloud, we call it here in the state, which again would have easily been in the top 5, maybe top 3 30 years ago. But again, over time, a few have surfaced, and so that doesn't quite make my list anymore, I guess is what I'm saying. This chapter patch, Choctaw chapter, was a 1960s era issue, and again, very difficult to find. Most people might not even place it with 224 or know what it was, but that's a chapter patch, and have always been difficult to find, particularly for folks who collect Kawiki. Coming in at number 10 on my list is the Cherokee 50 J1, the dance team jacket patch. This is it. Some might say, well, some of the ones you showed me earlier are probably more rare than this. And I would say, yeah, you got a point. But as far as collectability goes within the state, particularly over time, this dance team patch has always been on everyone's list. Um, the the story, best I can tell it, is that the lodge advisor, and this is a 1960s era dance team jacket patch, about 9 to 10 inches tall. Okay. So the lodge advisor at the time was very restrictive of his guys wearing these, his dance team members wearing these, and these were designed or actually issued on sewn to a red jacket. And I'm told that when the dance team would appear at area conferences, section conclaves, back at then in the 60s, that the advisor would hand out those jackets for them to wear, but then take them back up at the end of the weekend, so they wouldn't get, quote, lost or something like that. You'll find this J1 off the jacket. In other words, you'll find a mint copy occasionally. One or two might have leaked out, but most of them are going to actually have been sewn to those red jackets. Estimates are that maybe 25 or 30 of those were made, and then over the course of time, it was redone. And this is, I think, a 1980s era, early to mid 80s era, where they did the same thing. And again, they were designed to be worn on or sewn and issued on a jacket. And I've seen a couple of them still out there, with old members wearing them on that red jacket. Again, about 25 or 30 of those. Both of these are hard to get, but traditionally the J1 was one that was the Cherokee piece to get back in the day. Coming in at number 9 is the Alabama 179 C1. In 1987, the Alabama ceremony team were the champions of Section SE3 conclave, which was pretty much the state of Alabama at that time. And so the lodge and dance team, ceremony team advisor had rumored 12 of these made, and each member of the ceremony team, the 4 principals and the 2 advisors, each got 2. And that's it. This one has certainly stood the test of time. That's you haven't seen these leak out through the years, and this will be on the top, pretty much the top of the list most of the time, of those collecting Alabama. If not for the Trek and the Voyagers little pieces I talked about. At number 8, we're going to stick with Alabama and throw the Cahaba chapter neckerchief N1 in here. Now, this is a 1960s era chapter neckerchief, very rare. I've seen 3 of them, I think, in my time collecting. Again, very nondescript. Don't even know what lodge it is as far as the neckerchief itself goes. So it would be an easy one if you stumbled upon one. You could probably pick it up cheap if they didn't know, because it's so nondescript, but very difficult, and on lots of the lists of those who collect Alabama OA. Number 7 is the Aracoma first issue neckerchief. This is one that I would have rated a little higher, probably 20 plus years ago, because back then that was a neckerchief that everybody needed. It just seemed like all of the Aracoma collectors, that this was their last lodge need. A few have surfaced over the last 5-10 years, so some of those holes have been filled, but still, this is a classic neckerchief. I think, and some of you may be able to correct me, but I think this is a late 1950s era issue. Was probably a restricted issue, and it's just a classic neckerchief. There is a fake of this neckerchief that is a pretty good fake, and I wish I had pulled my example of the fake out to show you. It doesn't look as good as this. It's the ink runs on the fake a little bit, and the letters are a little bit more blocky, if you will, a little larger. I'll tell you what, if you see this one, you'll appreciate it. It's well done neckerchief. At number 6, I put the Aracoma QS1. I'm not really, this is the one that I struggled with because this is also somewhat of an enigma for me. And I spoke to John Hall about this particular issue a little earlier. And I'm not sure that any of us really know what this issue was or why it ended up like this. It was made around the same time that Aracoma made their original Ordeal Brotherhood and Vigil series. So early 80s, 83, 84, 85, somewhere in there. And my suspicion is that it may have been done as a prototype, looking at whether a gold border or a gold mylar border would look better for their life member flap, which looks like this too. In any event, the life member flap is a gold mylar border, and this is a gold border. Now, it is true that the folks who made this patch, the embroidery company that is, had a tendency to put different border colors on things from time to time and sell them in their junk bins. But usually when they did that, they would be found out. In other words, somebody'd go in and you did see 30 or 40 of one of these, one of the issues that they created in a different border. And it just wasn't the case for this one. So not sure where to put this one, but I will tell you that if you're trying to check off a list of the ones that really are the most difficult that are listed out there in collecting circles, this is in the top 10. Hard to find. I don't honestly know how many of these are out there. There may only be the one. It may truly be a prototype in that light. So top 5, the Cascanapo Inn Vigil neckerchief. Now, some of you who are familiar with Alabama will say, "No, wait a minute, I have that." And I would say, let's make sure, because here's next slide. This is the one I'm referring to. Oop, gave my hand. This is the one I'm referring to as number 5 on my list. This is the one that's more common. This Vigil neckerchief I think it was the 1993 or 1994 Fall Fellowship for Cascanapo. The lodge was trying to make some money, so they made, I think, 10 of these, or authorized 10 of these to be sold through the trading post at the Fall Fellowship, just to see if they would sell. And they did all sell out. I actually showed up late at that Fall Fellowship and did not get one of these. And like others, I was told, don't worry. Obviously, since they sold as well as they did, we're going to reorder. So when they reordered, this is what we got. And subsequent reorders, they would reorder in lots of like 25 or so. And subsequent reorders were all this neckerchief. So if you've got this neckerchief, it's still a good Cascanapo neckerchief. But if you've got this one, this was the original, sold about 93 or 94. And it was the first run. Obvious differences. Number 4, Kawiki. Now, here's one that you might think, how did this get on the list? Because it's not that old, and it's actually 1994 as well. So, yeah, it's what, 30 years ago. But this leather badge was made and given one per person or one per member to the dance team who participated in the dance ceremonies at the 1994 section conclave from Kawiki. So Kawiki made just enough to give to their dance team members, one per person, for that for that weekend just for participating at the section conclave level. No one thought anything about it. I was at that section conclave, it's like, okay, whatever. But this one has certainly stood the test of time. If you ask a Kawiki collector down there, some of the more advanced collectors, they're going to say, if you ask them what you need, sometimes the L1 is the only thing that's still left on their list. So that's a toughie. Number 3, and again, subjective. So you could you actually take all of these and kind of jumble them around. They'd all probably be in the top 10. But I gave number 3 to this one. Back in 1979, we were Southeast Region Section 4A, so SE4A. And Alabama decided to make a host lodge flat for this conclave. And they did so, but when they received them, this is what they got. So they got something that said SEYA instead of SE4A. We call it the SEA conclave. And again, they rejected the order, sent them back, but not before some of them got out and reordered and got this in. Now, this is a good flap, from that, and it's the first of the host flaps, I think, from this section, going forward. But this is the one to find. It's just hard to find, and yet they're out there. Johnny won't remember this, but back in 1986, 1987, we were going through, he and I were sitting in the middle of one of his bedrooms going through a major collection that he'd just gotten in and from the Northeast. And in that collection was one of these. So it's not that these got out, not many, but they were distributed a little bit, enough to where some of the major collectors of the time had them. So because it does have some collectability, there's more than 1 or 2 out there. I put it in here as number 3. All right, so we're at the top 2 now. What do you think? All right, my number 2 is the Kawiki 224 P1. Now, this is a late 50s issue. The Kawiki Lodge issued pies all the way into the late 70s, maybe even early 80s or so, starting in the late 50s. This is the only one with a cut edge. And rumors are that about 50 of these were made, and they were all sewn to neckerchiefs, to my knowledge. There may be 1 or 2 not sewn examples, but for the most part, they were all issued, designed to be issued on a thick, fairly substantially thick black cloth. The subsequent issues are all rolled edge. They look pretty much just like this, but the cut edge P1 from Kawiki is very difficult to find. I think more difficult than the R1. And then drum roll. What do you think? What's left? Well, in my world, this I consider to be the best of the bunch in 2024. The Cherokee 50 N1. This is a silk screened on a satin type material, issued in 1952. Some folks know the specifics of this. I don't have that letter with me, but I think the story goes is that the lodge advisor made 12 to 15 of them, made just enough for the folks in Cherokee who were delegates to the section conclave or area of the 1952 area conference to wear these. It's either that or the 52 NOAC. I think it was just the area conference. And that's it. That's what you saw. So there were 12, 15 of them. They were all intended to be worn at the area conference. And I've seen 2 examples of this, and they were both worn and they're just very, very hard to find. So that's my list. I did that pretty quickly for the sake of time, because there's a lot to talk about and argue about on all of these. But that's what I consider to be the top 10 OA issues as far as difficulty finding them in 2024.
I had put together my top 10 list prior to this to try to compare, and 5 of my 10 were in the honorable mention, and 4 of my 10 was in your list, and then there was one that was not on the list, car in the honorable mentions.
And which one?
That was the 135 first powwow.
Yeah, that could have easily been in the honorable mention part, in my opinion.
I'll chime in and quickly say that James and I did talk about that Aracoma QS1, and you know, I don't know if there's more than one out there. It may be a prototype. It's definitely one I've been searching for a long time, but a couple of them that I would have put in at least the honorable mention, James, is that Kawiki Orange Border S4. That a lot of people say doesn't exist. You know, that was an LEC piece. That's got to be up there. And then the other one that probably surprised me, you mentioned it, as the A1 from Aracoma, but then again, you know, that's my lodge, so I'm biased.
Well, and I agree. The Aracoma A1, you know, again, if you talk dollar value, it's in the top 10, you know, but most collectors, most of the serious Aracoma collectors, wouldn't you say, already have an A1? Right.
They have an A1B, and to find an A1A it's leaps and bounds.